I'll start by reading the first 4 chapters of his final book. Escapades of Fay Willows, Book 5. As you enter through the next door of his dreary dungeon, you are surprised to find his well-lit room. You see an open tome on a small table, a comfortable-looking chair residing next to it. The tome is oddly free of dust, in stark contrast to everything else in its place. Several of his pages seem to have been removed, but otherwise it appears to be in good condition. You wonder if the missing pages might be somewhere nearby. Chapter 1. Dead on Arrival. Truly there is nothing more disturbing than the experience of encountering ghouls. You will likely first smell them, as they emit a terrible stench. Else, if you're lucky, you'll just hear them as they groan in a low, painful sighing tone. Casting your eyes upon them, you'll be presented with a truly horrible display. Rows of hanging flesh and dripping pus surrounding a vaguely humanoid form. The worst of it, though, is their touch and feel. An average individual would likely feel grossly insulted just poking an ordinary corpse with a stick. Never mind engaging in walking a dead one up close in combat. As I walked along the western tree line, I recounted the events that led me to these daily patrols. 33 long years have passed since the cataclysm of Spellblaze. The moment solidly burned within my mind, as well as inside my body. I had survived the destruction, the incidents that followed from it, and now found myself here in Elvala. After joining the ranks of the Shoreline military, I would develop deeper feelings for one of the soldiers I trained with, and would eventually come to be married. Yet, while I was content with my life, I wondered how those in the outside world fared. Had the anger of my fellow Florins subsided, and the force of my home recovered? How evident were signs of Spellblaze's destruction elsewhere in the lands? Perhaps now might be a time when I should leave to explore, as I had often pondered on doing. Returning from my patrol along the old path that divided the western and northern forests, I noticed a cadre and military personnel in the distance, a couple of Elva's higher officials among them. As I approached the group, I caught sight of what looked to be a decaying corpse at their feet. Glancing towards the lifeless remains, I felt a close emanate, a dark force that felt worse than anything I'd ever experienced, including the tumultuous emotions within me. Becoming aware of my presence, one of the officials then turned towards me. "Fay, I need to quickly get to your side of the shroud," the official commanded. "Take a look around and report anything unusual you see." Sensing some urgency to this request, I promptly faced the Maj'Eyal barrier and dove in without a second thought. As I traveled through the misty smoke, I recalled the numerous times I had been inside this Maj'Eyal barrier. I had traversed the shroud before to rescue those who got themselves stranded outside of it, to act as an escort for Nargle emissaries and traders, or to help Ogre refugees gain sanctuary within the shoreline lands. This time, though, I could feel great tension around me and redoubled my efforts to go forward. For the next 2 hours, I slowly made my way through the smoke, until at last I began to see the world on the other side unfurl itself. As I was getting to the outer edge of the shroud, I then heard a guttural sound bell out from somewhere close by. Unexpectedly, a gaunt figure suddenly jumped out, its arms swinging violently in my direction. Caught off guard and unable to dodge, one of his arms would connect with my chest. The force of the strike reverberated through my steel breastplate and threw me off balance, giving this unknown assailant an opportunity to attack again. Thrusting forwards towards my left arm, I could feel teeth clamping down hard through my steel gauntlets. Pain seared through me as something virulent coursed through my body, sapping my strength and making me sluggish. I did not know who this attacker was, but I could feel the darkness amassing inside. All that was left to do was unleash it. Beginning to counterattack, I activated the heat beam rune in my left hand and set my opponent ablaze. Immediately following this, I began to overwhelm my foe with a fury of vicious blows, the brute flailing wildly around as it tried to fight back. Pressing my advantage, I struck with a devastating swipe that cut hard across the entity's upper body. Then I paused for a moment, waiting for whatever I was planning to keel over. To my surprise, I would find the struggle wasn't done yet, and a renewed offensive came my way. I stepped around as the being lunged past me, before following up with a simple slash to the back of the creature's neck. This partially separating its head from its body, bringing an end to the skirmish. Having a chance to close examine the enemy I just fought, I noticed a single eye hanging out from one of his eye sockets. Squinting for the mist at the rest of his body, I didn't realize I'd been fighting a rotting corpse. Blinking a bit as I got my thoughts together, I wondered if there were any more undead meandering about, and began to look around. It wasn't long before I observed a few more deceased individuals standing upright. Deciding I would dispatch the ghouls, I attempted to quietly approach one, only to realize how difficult this would be due to all the muddy ground in the area. It was at this point when I wondered why all the ground was so mucky, before I then discerned a multitude of tracks and footprints, all leading into the shroud. Realizing the danger I was headed to Elvala, I quickly activated my rune return, and waited for it to take effect. As always, I instantly found myself appearing in a crowded area with several Sherloin wandering about. Before I could reacquire my bearings, a female Sherloin officer accidentally walked into me, and I was knocked to the ground. Gaining awareness of my sudden entry, the officer returned to help me up, noticing the festering bite marks on my arm as she did. "Command will want to report on your undead we encountered," she stated. "We've had a few more wander in through while you were scouting." The officer then motioned with her head in the direction of the main fortification line, overlooking Elva's northern forests. Nodding back, I proceeded to run over to the right tower above the main gate, where I suspected the watch captain would be. I made my way through the host of gathering soldiers performing below the walls, and found my way to the staircase. Climbing up was slow, a result of all the archers and mages that were also hastily trying to get up to at the same time. As I came to the top, the watch captain called out in my direction, and I hurried over to give my report. Chapter 2. Elvala under attack. Looking past the gruesome nature of the unliving, I can somewhat appreciate the brilliance of the tactics and strategy that was employed. Everything seemed to have been meticulously planned out beforehand, and the undead followed those plans unerringly. This allowed the controlling necromancer to stay safely out of harm's way for the duration of the battle. As I finished giving my report, I noticed the watch captain's eyes become fixated on something within the shroud. Looking over myself, I then made out the curving distortions that were starting to appear in the magical barrier. Reacting to this, the captain gave a loud call to prepare to fire, and the archers and mages rapidly assumed firing stances. The captain then gave a simple arm swing, and full barrage followed over the battlements, the volley turning the distortions into a whirling maelstrom. Despite the onslaught that slammed through the mist, a glistening phalanx of moving bones and tired armor would emerge, and several rows of skeletons and defensive formations would come into view. Holding their shields high above their skulls, the skeletons moved in lockstep to each other, and slowly marched out toward us. The captain then gave the order to fire when ready, the archers and mages unleashing everything they could on the encroaching skeletal force. However, for every single skeleton that was shattered, or had its bones scattered across the battlefield, it seemed as if two more would emerge behind it. Being unliving enemies of no free will of their own, they continued to advance toward us, no matter how many of them we felled. As they drew closer to the base of our walls, the Sherloin soldiers from below began carrying up rocks and stones. Unlike with arrows and spells, the skeletons could not overcome the heavy weight that subsequently dropped on them, and many were instantly crushed and buried. Looking down at them, the watch captain seemed to muse over the situation. "I don't see them carrying any ladders," the captain muttered, "but judging from how they marched up to the walls, they must have some plan in mind." As the captain continued to martyrdom, I started to hear hoarse voices whispering in the air. All at once, panicked voices from those around us called out that they were under attack. Realizing right away that there must be something up here with us, I carefully looked around for signs of unseen actors, and felt the faint presence of something moving nearby. Quickly pulling my weapon out of its sheath, I slashed at the space where the presence was, and a low gasp escaped as my weapon cut through a hidden operation. Becoming aware of what was happening, the watch captain called out to the defenders on the walls, "We are under attack by shades! Defend yourselves!" All at once, everyone turned away from the battlements to respond to the new threat. Those that could determine where the spectres were would directly engage them, while those that couldn't unleash attacks in wide arcs were suspected they be. It wasn't long before a torrent death cry filled the air, but it soon became clear that this was just a mere distraction. The skeletons used this brief moment to construct ladders and form pyramids made up of their own bones. Now with the means to get to us, the skeletons hastily clambered up the battlements, and arrived on top of our walls. Using their superior numbers and hitting us before we had a chance to reorganize, we were pushed back enough they were successful in establishing a foothold. Seeing that we were going to be overwhelmed, the watch captain hurriedly gave the order to fall back, and a hurried scramble off the walls followed. Unfortunately, in the confusion, a fair number of soldiers couldn't disengage, or were too injured to leave, and consequently they got hacked to pieces. Having lost control of our fortifications, a small force of skeletons moved to take over the gates, and allow the remaining undead outside to get in. The majority of the skeletons, however, would jump off in pursuit of us, attempting to run us down. As we passed through one of Elva's narrow corridors, the watch captain saw an opportunity present itself and ordered the mages to form a firing line. Following closely after us, the skeletons folded themselves into a tight formation and thus made for a perfect target. Waves of lightning, fire, and cold spells washed over the skeletons and sent their bones skying all over the brick-covered road. Seeing these foes vanquished, the defenders started to break into resigning cheer, until realization set in that there was much more to come. Looking past the broken skeletons in front of us, we could see a great host of undead now flooding through our open gates. The guttural sounds of the front ghouls began to fill the air, and another legion of armored skeletons followed closely behind them. However, it is beyond these lowly undead that truly fighting necromantic abominations would come into sight, imposing giants composed of many bones, standing as high as Elva's tallest buildings. A final line of skeletons also appeared too, but these ones would instead wield staves and bows. Rapidly, the unliving enemies began to organize themselves, before beginning to move in a unified block toward us. Our mages attempted to ready another set of spells, but instantaneously found it difficult to do, the imposing undead raining down shots to disrupt them. Realizing we would have to engage the undead fully, we raised our shields and proceeded to step forward to give battle. As the front lines drew closer, we would be caught off guard when the ghouls made giant leaps over our entire formation. We soon found ourselves boxed in, the ghouls clawing our undefended back ranks, while the main bulk of the unliving collided into us from the front. With little room to maneuver, Shaloran archers and mages began to panic, and they were cut down by the ghouls, and they inevitably broke from the line. Sometime during the melee too, the watch captain would also be slain, his body rising as a subsequent ghoul that another soldier would fortunately have to put down. The situation was looking quite bleak and hopeless as they found themselves trapped by the undead on both sides, soldiers doing their best to wear attacks coming in from all directions. Chapter 3 Leadership from the Front. As an experienced commander would tell me long after the Battle of the Undead, the winner of a battle is not necessarily dictated by the amount of enemies slain, but rather by which side breaks first. While the quality of an army's ability to fight is important, it means nothing should soldiers lose able to fight. We had been lucky in the defense of Elvala, a result of the aid from the ogres, and the rallying leadership of Giant Gawaeil. Without them, all hope of victory would have surely been lost, and the unliving would have certainly overran us. The hatred within me began to build as those around me were attacked. However, I had my own problems to deal with. One of the bone giants, the name I would give those colossal abominations, steadily approaching to clobber me. Managing to avoid his first strike, I focused the malevolent thoughts within me to unleash a mighty attack, and destroyed a good portion of his middle region. This seemed to be for naught, however. The bone giant simply reorganized the bones of his body to form a protective barrier, and then seemingly began to rebuild itself anew a moment after. The bone giant then proceeded to unleash another heavy swing against me, leaving me stunned and temporarily unable to react. Putting my back foot, matters only got worse when a ghoul approached me from behind and bit deeply into my shoulder. My situation was looking quite precarious, but from the rear I heard a voice call out, the ghoul behind me then hurling forward. A flash of frost then blasted a hole through the ghoul and blew off one of the arms of the bone giant. I didn't notice the young orc stepping up to stand beside me, a spent, ruined insignia visible on his left forearm. I could also hear the familiar footsteps of stampeding orcs elsewhere, hurrying into the fray. I didn't have much time to observe what was happening, however, the bone giant converging on us expeditiously to continue the fight. Attacking the ogre first, the much bigger bone giant swiped from the side with his arm, and knocked the ogre away like a rag doll. Leaving himself open to me, I lunged forward to attack the bone giant while I was unguarded. This would have negligible effect, however, as I lacked the strength to put any real force into the blow. What's more, the barrier of bones surrounding the bone giant would absorb the damage done entirely. Responding to my efforts, the bone giant came at me with a powerful battering, and then belted me another for good measure. Yet again, the ogre came to my aid, tackling into the bone giant's lower frame and knocking it down. Seeing me in my exhausted state, the ogre shouted at me to run, and braced himself for retaliation to come with a shielding run. Battered and bruised, I heeded the advice to get away, and tarred off to recover. After gaining some distance from the bloody engagement, I turned to view the battlefield in its entirety. The enemy ranks had been broken significantly by the charging ogres, but a good deal of our defensive line was injured or dead. Many of those Shaloran who had panicked had now returned to fight, engaging in small groups that kept the unliving off balance. However, the support line of undead mages and archers remained largely intact, and were now pressing hard into our unguarded flanks. This scene was one of chaos, and I could not tell if we were winning or losing, though countless comrades were falling all the same. "It seems that this has turned into quite the battle," a voice said from behind me. All of a sudden, as I heard those words being stated, I could feel myself being enveloped in a bright glow, my bruises disappearing, my wounds closing up. Turning to face the voice, I came face to face with a brilliantly armed Shalor, his glowing hand outstretched toward me. I recognized the armor worn and weapon held as being the same set from the Grand Council chambers, but was it really him wearing it? Putting a hand down, the Shalor continued to say, "I'm no doctor, but this should be enough to keep you on your feet until battle's end. Now then, let's see." He paused for a moment as he took in the sight of the battlefield, then began to draw in a deep breath. In a rather surprisingly loud voice for Shalor, he yelled, "Defenders! Focus your efforts on crushing the skeleton archers and mages! Leave those huge monstrosities to me!" Before I even had a chance to understand what was going on, the Shalor then blinked in front of the ogre that helped me, and instantly struck aside the bone giant. All at once, a violent display of colors exploded, shattering the bone giant into 1,000 pieces. Not missing a beat, the Shalor swiftly moved on to the next one, and brought it down with little effort as well. Seeing this marvelous display, I immediately began relaying my will to fight, and began to run in the direction of the undead's firing line. Before I could reach the skeleton mages and archers, however, a couple armored ones stepped forward with their shields raised. Looking to break through them and press on, I rushed forward foolishly, only for the attack to be deflected, my footing also thrown off balance. Seeing the opportunity, one of the armored skeletons dropped his shield down and prepared to launch a counterattack. Before it could though, a heavy club flew over my head, and a skeleton skull was sent sailing away. From behind me, another one of the ogres arrived at my side, and together we converged on a second skeletal fighter. After sending bones flying, I nodded to my fellow border in arms, and we continued on towards the undead archers and mages. Along with the other defenders, we dove deep within the enemy ranks and tore our weapons through their back line. Perhaps realizing that they had no hope of winning, the skeletons then turned around and began to fall back to escape. Getting ready to pursue them, we were stopped by the remaining ghouls, who jumped in between us and the retreating skeletons. The surviving bone giants that had not been dispatched by Gawaeil would also come to help the ghouls in forming a rearguard. While our undead foes had been weakened significantly, this last defensive action gave enough time for an ample amount of skeletons to get away. Chapter 4 Confrontation. I was oddly able to get back on my feet quite easily, after receiving the healing spell cast on me by General Gawaeil. This would hold true to additional aid I would receive after the battle had concluded. While I know I was given equipment that magically helped my ability to recover, it seems that I meant even faster when the chaotic emotions from deep within are surging forth. This isn't something I can easily take advantage of, however. Those same hateful energies rapidly dissipate after a fight, usually before I can get proper medical attention. It was at this point that I knew we had won. The bone giants remained still proved to be quite a threat, but with enough overwhelming force, they too would be defeated. As the last of the behemoths of bone were destroyed, the defenders began to break into another victory cheer. I was about to join in, but I noticed another bright glow enveloping me. Turning around, I would see that I was now being tended to by a healer, some regenerative infusions also being offered with their other hand. From somewhere nearby, I then heard the voice of that Maj'Eyal state. "Help Fay as quick as you can, Doctor. I want her in peak form as soon as possible." Hearing my name spoken, I wondered again if it was indeed him. Looking over toward the Shalor, I saw him take off his helmet, and then I confirmed that was indeed General Gawaeil's face. Speaking to me directly, he stated, "We will be exiting through the shroud to see if we can catch whoever was responsible for this incursion. Judging how the undead were acting, it is likely that whoever sent them must be nearby." I silently nodded as I registered the words, after which he pulled back on his helmet and did a quick check of his equipment. When the healing spell was finished, the general ordered that they wouldn't be taken to healing grounds, and held out his hand in my direction. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed hold, and the general then used the charm to bring us to the other side of the shroud. As I got my bearings, it didn't take me long to notice the retreating group of undead, or the lone cloaked figure that was moving among them. Keeping a good distance, General Gawaeil and myself then started to shout at them as we moved to the north. For a couple of days we traveled just west of the Nargol land border, passing multiple destroyed settlements which showed signs of being recently attacked. I had guessed that the Nargos had attempted to reclaim these lands, only for their citizens to be turned into unliving thralls. Those newly risen ghouls then used it against us in Elvala. We slowly made our way after the skeletons, into another settlement northwest of the Nargol capital. Rounding the edge of one of the buildings, we spotted a cloaked figure sitting next to a well. Out from one of the buildings, a couple of skeletons emerged carrying some food on a plate. One there brought water up with a bucket. Whispering in a hushed voice, the general quietly commented, "It appears, unlike the rest of those following, our friend here is alive." As if on cue to this statement, a low raspy voice spoke from the shrouded being. "Yes, I am very much alive." Dead silence permeated the air for a long moment after that, apart from the sound of food being eaten by the figure. The skeleton staying motionless, perhaps waiting for some cue to act. Sensing that this obscure being wished to talk first, the general stepped out in full view, clutching his weapon but not withdrawing it. Seeing the general, it was almost as if a joyous cry escaped as the cloaked figure exclaimed, "Ah! You were the one who was capable of crushing my creation in one blow! I must say, I wasn't expecting someone to be capable of doing that. Well done! Although your abilities in stealth are perhaps not as notable." General Gawaeil then drew his sword and stood at the ready before announcing in a loud voice, "I very much like to crush the creator as well." To this a raspy laugh escaped from the clueless fool. Then, as if to taunt the general, our reckless adversary motioned with her hand to give it a try. Without hesitation, General Gawaeil instantly began charging forward. Noticing a sudden movement, the skeletons quickly moved to the form of a defensive line, blocking the approach. Consisting mostly of mages and archers at this point, they laid down a volley of projectiles and deadly measures to disrupt the advance. Immediately though, the general teleported himself next to his ill-advised antagonist and avoided it all entirely. Reacting to this swiftly, the shadowy individual produced a spear of protective magical energy, ready to meet the enemy attack. Tightly gripping his sword with both hands, the general raised it above his head and brought it down in a powerful swing. I'm not sure as to what happened next, a blindly bright flash then shooting forth from the magical clash. I do know there was an explosion of energy that erupted, and soon a shockwave ripped through the realms to the summit and sent me soaring backwards. Finding myself within the building, I attempted to reorient myself and stumbled to my feet. I made my way out through a hole in the wall that I had been thrown through and looked to survey what happened. All I could see was a scene of destruction, as torn ground, ruined buildings, and charred air remained. Stepping outside, my foot crushed one of the many shattered bones that now lay strewn about the ground. This would unfortunately be noticed by several skeletons who had also survived the blast. When they raised their weapons in my direction, I knew I needed to act quickly. I approached a couple of the closer skeletons and deftly broke one into pieces with a couple of well-placed strikes. I was about to advance toward a second, but then I noticed the other skeletons raising staves towards me. I then dropped down behind a rubble in a nearby building I just exited, avoiding the explosions of magic that lit up the space I'd previously been in. Holding my weapon tightly, I could hear the skeletal footsteps approaching my position. I righted myself as I waited for the skeletons to come closer, watching for a moment when they would appear.